My hometown is cursed land, a true story in Vietnam. Part 1. The Dog with the Hat and the Cane. I grew up in Bac Bian village, just across the Red River, under the shadow of the Long Bien Bridge. My grandmother had 4 children. My mom, Uncle D, Uncle C, and Aunt T. In 1986, Uncle D had his first child, Lynn. Around that time, Grandma brought home 2 puppies and named them Tin and Mike. She loved animals. She said Lynn and the 2 dogs were born in the same year, like siblings. Tin and Mike grew up in that house, watched Lynn grow into a teenager, and became part of the family. Tin, in particular, was incredibly smart. After 15 years together, it understood almost everything. It would wander the yard, watch over the chickens for Uncle D, and even fetch baskets when asked. Mike, on the other hand, was different. It kept to itself, always growling low, but rarely barking. Strangely, no stray animal ever dared to step into our yard when Mick was around. That summer in 2001, the river rose higher than usual. One evening, Tin didn't come home. By morning, Uncle D found it dead by the riverbank. We buried it beneath the banana tree in the yard. Grandma didn't speak a word that morning. Around noon, while she was hanging rice outside to dry, she suddenly heard a steady tapping sound. Thump, 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 coming from the backyard. She thought it might be a guest, so she grabbed her conical hat to go outside. But what she saw froze her blood. Behind the old tree, Meek was walking upright on its hind legs, wearing Grandma's conical hat and holding a wooden cane between its front paws. Step by step, it made its way from the backyard toward the gate, calmly, almost ceremoniously. Grandma's mouth went dry. All she could whisper was, D, come here." Uncle D and his wife rushed out from the kitchen. When they saw it, they too stopped dead in their tracks. Mike kept walking upright, tongue hanging out, hat on its head, tapping the cane on the ground as it slowly made its way toward the gate. None of them could move. When it finally reached the gate, Uncle D broke out of his trance and sprinted after it. The moment he turned the corner, Meek vanished. Gone. Later that night, it rained heavily. The river was high, the wind loud. By morning, Uncle D found the grave where Tin had been buried. Dug up, the body was gone. All that remained were dozens of dog paw prints in the mud. To this day, Grandma still says Tin and Meek never really left the yard. We just can't see them anymore. Part 2. The Guar. On my mother's side of the family, the land is wide and old. When my grandfather passed away, the property was divided among the children. My mother moved to Hanoi. Uncle D and Uncle C built their own houses, and Grandma stayed behind in a small house near Uncle C's backyard to tend. There's something strange about that land. Everyone who lives there only ever has daughters. Uncle D had 2 daughters. Uncle C, who struggled to have children, also ended up with 2 girls. My Aunt T's in-laws, same story, even the neighbors. People say some lands are filled with yin-en. But this isn't the... Back when my mother was 12, Grandpa worked late shifts at the Hong Ha pen factory. Many nights, he didn't get home until after midnight. Their old house was small. 1 room, wooden doors, and creaky floors. That night, it rained softly. Grandma and Mom lay together, waiting for him to return, when they heard something moving in the yard. Thud, thud. The sound grew louder, like hooves striking wet ground. Suddenly, with a loud clack, the wooden door's latch dropped on its own. The doors swung open. A gust of cold, wet wind rushed in, blowing out the oil lamp. My uncles, just kids at the time, clung to Grandma in terror. The hoofbeats echoed on the wet brick floor, and then, through the doorway, a rider entered the house, a man on a black horse. but he had no head. The horse reared back, neighing loud enough to shake their bones. My mother screamed. Grandma froze. The rider's headless body turned toward the door, just as Grandpa's footsteps were heard outside. The rider spun the horse around and galloped out into the storm, toward the river. Grandpa burst through the gate moments later, saw the open doors, heard the frantic voices, and without a second thought, grabbed his machete and sandals and ran into the night after it. He didn't return until morning, barefoot, soaked, and carrying only one sandal. He never told anyone what happened out there, not even Grandma. The next day, Grandma called a monk and a spirit medium. They followed the hoofprints down to the riverbank, near a bamboo grove. One of them pointed to a spot and said, "Dig." 1.5 meters down, they found it. The skeleton of a horse and the remains of a man in ancient battle armor, headless. They held a ritual and raised an altar. From then on, our family began worshipping the headless general as a guardian spirit. And ever since, whenever something terrible was about to happen to the family, something unseen would quietly make it right again. Part 3. The white-haired grandmother. My grandmother is in her 70s now. She was born into a wealthy family. Her father worked for the government before the war, but the family's fortune didn't last. One by one, everything was taken, and like the land itself, their bloodline carried a strange curse. Only daughters were ever born. She was beautiful when she was young, married early, became a mother at 16. Life was hard, but she endured. Then came the night everything changed. When my mother was 14, after the night they saw the headless rider, Grandma suddenly went mad. Not just a breakdown, real madness. She was sent to True Ku Mental Hospital. 2 months passed. One night my mom was alone at home. Rain tapped against the windows when she heard someone knocking, slow and steady, at the gate. She opened it, and Grandma was standing there. Her clothes were torn, her feet bare, her face pale. But what made my mom collapse to the ground was her hair. That thick, black, beautiful hair my mom had brushed just a day earlier had turned completely white. "I'm not crazy anymore," Grandma whispered. But her voice didn't sound like hers. It was distant, hollow. The roads between Trau Kuo and Long Bien were heavily guarded at the time. No one could walk alone at night without being stopped by soldiers. Yet somehow, Grandma had walked the entire way home, unseen. When she came inside, her voice shifted back to normal. She said a woman in white had entered her room, called her by name, and told her, "If you want to go home, follow me." Do exactly as I say, Grandma obeyed without question. One moment she was in the asylum. The next, she was home. She never went mad again after that night, but her hair stayed white forever. And strange things started happening around her after that. Part 4. The Lost Heirs. My great-grandfather was a clever man, a land clerk. He made the family rich and respected. He had 5 wives. But despite his wealth, the land carried a cruel pattern. All the women in the family gave birth only to girls, except for one. His second wife lived in Hanoi and gave birth to a brilliant boy, T. My great-grandfather adored him. T grew up smart, sharp, loved to fish by the Red River. One day, while fishing with his best friend, the hook snagged on something underwater. He waded in to free it, and never came back up. The friend packed the fishing rod and went home without a word. They searched the river for days. It was just a shallow pool near the bank, but his body was gone. My great-grandfather broke. His only son had vanished into water that shouldn't have been able to drown anyone. Then, years later, his third wife became pregnant. At his old age, hope returned. She was radiant during the pregnancy. Doctors said it would be a boy. But in the 7th month, she fell gravely ill. Both she and the baby died. My great-grandfather collapsed in the yard and cried like a child. He never recovered from that blow. Slowly, the family fortune crumbled, and the curse carried on. No male heirs survived. Even my grandfather's generation ended the same way. Only daughters or sons who never made it to adulthood. Part 5. The Beggar Woman. My grandfather grew up by the river. A quiet boy, lean and strong. He loved the water more than anything. He could swim across the Red River even during the flood season. Every day, rain or shine, he disappeared for hours down by the riverbank. When he was 13, a beggar woman wandered into the village. Rumor said she came from the mountains, accused of witchcraft, beaten nearly to death, and left to wander. Her hair was matted, her laughter sharp and wild. Everyone avoided her, except my grandfather. He'd bring her food, a piece of bread, a fruit, a handful of rice. She lived in the bamboo grove on the riverbank. One summer, the flood came. The water rose, swallowed everything. When it receded, they found her body tangled in the roots of the bamboo, swollen, her mouth twisted in that same grin she wore when she was alive. They buried her right there. Years later, one night, Grandpa walked home alone from a village meeting. The moon hung low. The bamboo grove swayed. As he passed the grave, he heard it. A laugh, a woman's laugh. Then a voice called softly, "T, do you still have a piece of bread for me?" He froze. The wind picked up. The bamboo leaned back and moonlight spilled across her grave. There on the treetop, she was standing, smiling down at him. She whispered in a raspy voice, "You were kind to me. I'll find you a wife." Then she vanished. That night, Grandpa came home pale as a ghost. After that, he spoke less and less, but he spent even more time down by the river. No one ever knew what he did out there. Part 6. The Wedding. My grandmother was born into a wealthy family, but everything fell apart when she grew up. After my great-grandfather passed away, the fortune scattered like dust. Orphaned and penniless, she and her sisters returned to the countryside, working the cornfields like everyone else. People whispered, "The daughter of a rich family like N won't last long out here." But my grandmother never complained, not once. My grandfather was 6 years older than her. Since childhood, the river was his whole world. He spent his life swimming in the Red River, hauling wood, tending the fields. The sun burned his skin to a deep bronze, and years of labor carved strong muscles into his frame. In my memory, he was tall, broad-shouldered, and strikingly handsome. The village girls used to giggle and dare each other to catch his eye. Whoever could bring tea home would be the luckiest bride. But he never cared. His heart belonged to the cornfields, the silted banks, and that relentless river that flooded the village every year. Every summer, the river rose for 3 months straight, swallowing half the tiny village of Bac Bien. People packed up and fled, or went to the city to find work. The floods were massive, but predictable. And just as predictably, they brought back bodies, cows, pigs, chickens, and people. The current would drag them in, tangled in bamboo groves or washed up on the muddy shore. When the waters receded, the young men would bury the strangers, hoping their families might one day find them. The summer of '56, the river rose fast and violent, higher than any man's head. The village emptied except for a few young men who stayed behind to salvage drifting timber. My grandfather was among them. He was busy pulling a log when he heard a scream, a sharp, desperate cry for help. A young woman was clinging to a log, being swept toward the whirlpool mid-river. The current out there didn't follow any direction. It dragged you wherever it pleased. The others hesitated, their faces pale. My grandfather didn't say a word. He dove straight in. He knew the river like the back of his hand, every shallow patch, every hidden drop. After a brutal struggle, he dragged the girl ashore, both of them gasping. That's when he saw her face. N, a girl from the same village. She'd been collecting the last of her things before evacuating when she slipped into the swirling water. If he hadn't reached her in time, she would have joined the others, the nameless bodies the river carried back each year. My grandfather didn't make a big deal out of saving her. He never did. But from that day on, N came to the riverbank every day to see him. She was already engaged to a factory worker in the district, so he ignored her. He even told her, coldly, bluntly, to stop coming, because neighbors had started to talk. Still, she came, only at noon or at dusk. She'd bring him a flask of water, a pot of stew, sweep the little shack he stayed in by the fields. Quiet, persistent, like something waiting in the shadows. Eventually, he left the river. He got a job at the Hong Ho pen factory, and the shack fell silent. He met another girl there, a strong, beautiful woman who would one day become my grandmother. They were inseparable. N still went to the riverbank twice a day, waiting for someone who never came back. The day she found out he was getting married, she asked to meet him by the river. He said she looked hollow. She told him that ever since he saved her, every noon and dusk, a woman with a limp and a raspy voice came to her house. That woman would grab her hand and drag her to the riverbank, force her to cook, to clean for him, to wait for him. She said she loved her fiancé, but it didn't matter. That woman always came, even after he stopped working the fields. My grandfather's blood turned to ice. N cried and cried, saying, "My life doesn't belong to me anymore." Then she ran home. The next morning, they found her hanging in his abandoned shack. On my grandparents' wedding night, a black cat jumped up to the rafters. It stared down at my grandfather and spoke, "It's me, it's me, it's me," 7 times. Years later, when my grandmother returned home after losing her mind, my grandfather swore. When he opened the door, the woman standing there wasn't her. It was N, and beside her was the old beggar woman from the year before. The old woman looked him dead in the eye and rasped, "It's me!" My grandfather didn't scream. He just went to the altar and burned 3 sticks of incense for the Chinese general he worshipped. When the last ember died, a violent wind howled through the riverbank. The doors slammed open, then shut. Only then did he return to talk to my grandmother. Part 7. The River Spirit. Of all the stories I've told, the river is always there. The Red River winding past Ngok Tue with its endless sandbanks. It's a place that's beautiful in the daylight and deeply, deeply wrong when the sun goes down. Years ago, the riverbank along Jia Lam was massive. It stretched from the foot of Long Bien Bridge all the way toward the military academy. In the dry season, the water pulled back so far that people could almost swim to the middle of the river with ease. The villagers planted corn, sweet potatoes, vegetables, and dug up sand to sell. Over time, the machines carved the sandbank into a strange landscape of deep pits. When the floods came and left again, water stayed behind, forming a small lake beside the shore, a perfect, still pool. Our house was less than 100 meters away from that lake. When we were kids, my grandfather used to take us there to swim. The water was shallow near the edges, deep in the middle. It felt like a natural swimming pool. Every child in the village loved it. But there was one strict rule, unwritten, but everyone knew it. No one went near the river at noon or at night. My grandmother used to say, "The Ma Nam lives there." Ma Nam, the river spirits, are the souls of those who drowned, those who slipped under without warning, those whose bodies washed ashore. They can't move on. At noon and after dark, they gather at the banks, waiting for someone with the right life force to take their place. If they find that person, they can be reborn. That's what the old people said. Some nights, villagers heard splashes echoing from the lake. Laughter, too, thin and childlike, drifting through the fog. Frog hunters swore they'd seen pale figures, white shapes diving in and out of the water, giggling softly to each other. No one went near the river at those times. No one, except my uncle. Uncle D was the second of 4 siblings. My mom was the eldest, then D, then Uncle C and Aunt T. He'd been a troublemaker since he could walk. He grew up to be the village thug, always fighting, always testing his luck. People called him D-flat, like some kind of bad omen. He ended up in prison after beating a man nearly to death. When he got out, he was meaner, colder. He hated anything to do with the supernatural. If someone mentioned ghosts or spirits, he'd either laugh in their face or slap them if they were younger. "There's no such thing as ghosts in Gia Lam," he used to say. "I've faced death a dozen times. If anything wanted me, it would have taken me already." Then, 9 years ago, everything changed. Uncle D got stomach cancer. He had surgery that removed 2/3 of his stomach. The once strong man withered down to bones. But his temper, still there, maybe worse. That day was hot. The sun blazed down on the sandbanks. Uncle D and Uncle C went to the lake to swim. Around noon, Uncle C told him to head home. He refused, so C left him there alone. Half an hour later, he still hadn't come back. When my aunt went looking, she found him stumbling up the path, dripping wet. His skin was pale as chalk. His movements jerky, unsteady, like a drunk. My aunt thought he'd passed out from the heat. She tried to help him inside. That's when things got wrong. He collapsed in the courtyard, sat down hard, threw his head back and started laughing. Long, high, broken laughter that didn't sound human. His eyes rolled back, the whites swallowing the pupils. His tongue lolled out, long and blackened. He was barefoot, bareheaded, glaring at the sun like it wasn't burning him. My family gathered around in shock. My grandmother stepped forward, pointed straight at him, and yelled, "Who are you? Where are you from?" His head turned slowly toward her. His mouth opened, and out came a voice that didn't belong in this world, distorted, like a broken speaker crackling through static. "My home is Hai Duong." The entire courtyard fell silent. He smiled. No, it smiled, and the grin split wider across his face. My grandmother whispered 2 words, "Ma Nam." Then she walked toward the gate. No one dared follow her. The thing wearing my uncle's body said its name was Nguyen. It claimed to have drowned in a flood back in 1996. It had wandered the riverbanks ever since, waiting for someone with a compatible soul. That day, it found him. Then it asked for porridge. My aunt brought out a pot of steaming rice porridge. The moment it touched the ground before him, the pot went ice cold. The porridge soured instantly, as if it had been left out for days. He hadn't even touched it, but the air smelled like rot. My father lost his temper and shouted. The thing ignored him. It dragged itself toward the kitchen. Our family stored corn in heavy steel barrels. Each one weighed more than 100 kilos when full. 2 strong men would struggle to move one. This thing inside my thin, frail uncle lifted the barrel like it was nothing. It staggered into the yard, then hurled it over the wall into the neighbor's garden with a dull, sickening thud. My dad and Uncle C lunged to restrain him. It flicked them away like insects. Then it went back to where it started, sat down, looked at the sky, and it laughed. My entire family never took their eyes off it. The dog that belonged to Uncle C, the one that usually played in Uncle D's garden every day, was now curled up inside its kennel, whining softly. Everyone had backed away but still formed a tight circle, afraid it might drag my uncle toward the river. My grandaunt held her prayer beads, whispering prayers non-stop, but the only response it gave was a chilling giggle. The sun beat down hard. It forced my uncle to sit shirtless in the middle of the brick courtyard, wearing only shorts. His face was pale, drained of all life. Then my grandmother came home. She was holding a mulberry branch she had just picked from the cemetery. Somehow, she'd also found a way to soak it in a child's urine. She looked it dead in the eye and called my uncle's name loudly, 3 times. D, D, D exclamation mark. Each time she shouted his name, she struck him hard with the thorny branch. It stopped laughing. Its head slowly turned toward my grandmother, glaring with sharp, blackless eyes, but didn't move. She kept striking. By the 6th blow, it collapsed to its knees, pressing its hands together in a mock prayer. It said it knew it was wrong and just wanted some money to travel. My grandmother didn't say a word. She kept hitting. At the 9th strike, my uncle's body jerked violently, foam pouring from his mouth. Then he went still. My aunt screamed, throwing herself onto him, crying hysterically. "You killed my husband," she wailed. But my grandmother, through her tears, said he'd be fine. The evil spirit was gone now. She would take care of the rest. Then she quietly left. The next morning, just like she said, Uncle D woke up, completely unaware of what had happened. The only thing he remembered was being forced underwater. He didn't believe any of us, accusing everyone of making up ghost stories. But it didn't end there. A few months later, it was Aunt Ung's turn. She was the daughter-in-law of my grandaunt, living right next door. Just a wall separating our gardens. She was still young then, just married to Uncle H, and had recently moved into the neighborhood. The night it happened, the dogs wouldn't stop barking. But their barking wasn't normal. It came in single, drawn-out bursts. My grandmother used to say, 1 bark means a ghost. 3 barks mean a person. The dogs can sense what humans can't. That night, it was the ghosts they were warning us about. Past 1 a.m., the barking grew frantic. Moments later, there were screams from my grandaunt's house. Footsteps, cries, chaos. My cousin and I ran outside. In the dim yellow glow of the porch light, I saw Aunt Ing clutching a rope tied to a long tree branch, her head pressing down toward the noose. My grandaunt and 2 other aunts were desperately pulling at her legs, sobbing. Her hair was long and loose, covering her face. She growled deep, animalistic sounds. 3 grown women pulled at her, but she was unnaturally strong, swinging back toward that noose, letting out spine-chilling hisses. The lantern above the yard rattled in the wind, casting flickering light on the scene. Dogs whimpered. Someone screamed. It was a nightmare come alive. Then my grandmother arrived with the uncles. As the wind howled through the courtyard, Uncle D climbed up the tree and cut the rope. Aunt Ung crashed headfirst onto the brick floor, blood seeping from her scalp. My grandmother slowly walked toward her limp body, pushed the hair from her face. And then everyone froze. Aunt Ung's head was twisted completely backward while her body was still face down. The yellow light swung just enough to make it clear. Her face was bloated, her eyelids shut tight, blood trickling down her temples, and her mouth was chewing something. When she looked up at my grandmother, she smiled, revealing the twitching leg of a frog between her teeth. People screamed and scattered, but she crawled toward the rope again. My grandmother yelled for everyone to hold her down. They tied her up and dragged her under the family altar. She said this was the work of a hanging spirit, a ghost who had died by hanging and was now luring others to die the same way. It makes its victims eat live frogs or toads, so their bodies go numb, or they die from the poison. But Aunt Ung's fate was strong. The family caught it in time. My grandmother lit 3 incense sticks, grabbed her beetle nut knife and a boiled egg. She and my grand-aunt performed a ritual until nearly 2 a.m. Finally, Aunt Ung snapped out of it. They rushed her to the hospital to have her stomach pumped. Today, she still lives right next door, but none of us have ever forgotten the way she smiled that night. Story 8. The Monster of the Red River. It's a strange thing about people. Wherever we live, we carry with us a quiet fear of something that lurks nearby. For those who live their lives on the water, fishermen and boat dwellers, that fear is something called Har-Bar. No one really knows what Har-Bar is. The old folks say he's a river god, sent from the heavens to rule over a section of the river. That's why the fishing villages have long practiced the custom of worshipping him, praying for good catches, calm waters, and protection from wandering spirits. Over generations, they've built an unspoken agreement with Har-Bar. If someone falls into the river and is claimed by him, no one must save them, even if it's your own blood. To steal someone back from Har-Bar is to risk your entire family's life. It's a cruel superstition. But in my village, there's something even more terrifying than Har-Bar. They call it the Tuong Luong, the river monster. About a year ago, a story spread online about a giant turtle that once lived in the Song Hong. It was massive, its shell said to be the size of a bed. It would crawl onto shore to snatch cattle, dragging them down into the water to eat. Villagers were terrified. Eventually, they struck it with a harpoon, and it disappeared upstream. People believed it fled to escape the hunters, but the elders in my village knew better. That wasn't the end of it. Over a decade ago, when my grandfather was still alive, he still swam in the river every morning. Even in his old age, he was strong, a man of the water, careful never to offend the river gods or stir up the nameless things that lived below. Every morning at 6, like clockwork, he'd head out for a swim, then return home by 6:30. But one morning, he didn't come back. My grandmother, worried sick, ran down to the river. She saw him there in the middle of the water, calmly scrubbing his arms like always. She called out to him, but he didn't answer. He just kept bathing. She stepped closer, ready to yell louder, and then she froze. Where he was standing was over 10 meters from shore. The water there was far deeper than his height, but half of his body was above the surface, as if he were standing on something. A chill ran through her. She screamed his name. My grandfather jerked, lost his balance, and fell backward into the water. The surface rippled outward in a long, heavy wave, followed by a deep W-H-A-A-P sound. He swam back to shore, shaken but unharmed. When she asked, he said he'd just felt a smooth stone under his feet, about a meter wide, and stood on it. He thought only a few minutes had passed, but she told him it had been over 2 hours. When he fell, the wave was too big, too heavy, like something alive was moving beneath. They went home without looking back. Years earlier, in the snake village of Lamat, a place famous for its snake meat and booming trade, people had already whispered about strange things. Livestock disappearing overnight, heavy rustling in the dark, fear creeping into every home. A powerful spiritual master was called in. He walked the village, said there was something ancient there, a great spirit. He performed a midnight ritual, pouring buffalo blood all the way to the river and offering 49 straw effigies. That night, villagers locked their doors and listened to the wind carry fast, scraping sounds and a low hiss like 1,000 snakes. By dawn, the trail of blood had been torn into the soil, dragged into the river. 10 days later, the shaman's corpse was found on the levee, bones shattered, blood pouring from his nose, ears, and mouth. His eyes had exploded. After that night, people near the river often heard splashes in the dark. When my mother was young, she often biked across Khao Long Bien at dusk, bringing rice water home for the pigs. One evening, while pedaling across the bridge, she saw something disturb the surface of the river. The water rose in a long, powerful swell. She stopped. Beneath the surface, in the fading light, was the shadow of a colossal snake. It was black, moving slowly toward the village shore. She couldn't guess how long it was, only that it stretched across the water, its crimson horn breaking the surface before it vanished into the depths. Later that Lunar New Year, my grandmother told the story to the village monk. He grew quiet, then finally said, "That spirit followed the shaman back after the ritual. It's a snake spirit, born from the vengeful energy of all the snakes slaughtered for food. It sleeps beneath the river, feeding on drowned bodies and cattle. It's huge, strong, but it can't cross into the village because our patron deity guards the shore. It killed off the giant turtles that once lived here. What your grandfather stood on wasn't a rock, it was its back. Today, whenever I cross that bridge and look down at the Song Hong, the water still carries strange ripples, as if something massive is still down there, waiting." Story 9, Lin. Lin is my cousin, Uncle Dee's eldest daughter. She has a younger sister named Lian. Lin was born in 1986, the year of the tiger, at the hour of the tiger. My mother always said that girls born during that hour are blessed with luck and fortune, but their lives are often tangled with hardship. The older Lin got, the prettier she became. By the time she turned 18, she was tall, fair-skinned, and bright-eyed. Naturally, boys started hovering around the house. Some lingered at the gate, others tried to ask her out or brought little gifts and snacks. Lin never flirted back, never gave them any attention. That only made them more persistent. Uncle D hated it. He chased them off with a stick. He despised boys loitering around, distracting his daughter when she was studying for her college entrance exams, especially the sloppy ones who didn't even bother to turn off their engines before entering the gate. Lin's life became like a prison. She wasn't allowed to go anywhere. Meals, breaks, schedules, everything was arranged so she could study. Even when my brother and I came over, Uncle D would scowl if we talked too long. Her entire existence was buried in piles of books taller than her head. Every night, at exactly 7 p.m., she turned on her desk lamp and studied until midnight. Her room was on the second floor, facing a large starfruit garden. Beyond the trees stood an old brick wall, and beyond that, the river. Her desk faced the window, but she never opened it. She was terrified of the dark, and she couldn't swim. Lin was a quiet, obedient girl. Whatever Uncle D said, she'd do it, even if it meant forcing herself through exhaustion. He trusted her completely. At 7 p.m. each night, once he saw the light on upstairs, he'd relax and go to bed. The staircase to the second floor was outside, so her room was isolated. Lian slept downstairs. The entire second floor belonged to Lin. But something began to change. Within a week, she lost so much weight that her bones showed. Her skin turned pale, her eyes vacant. She barely spoke. My mom told Uncle D she might be suffering from stress, or worse, slipping into depression. Uncle D grew worried. That night, everything started like usual. Lin went upstairs early, the light turned on, and Uncle D went to bed. But around midnight, his back pain flared up, and he couldn't sleep. He checked the clock, 11:45. He figured he'd go upstairs to tell Lin to stop studying and get some rest. The stairs were slippery from the earlier rain, so he climbed slowly. Her room light was still on. He cracked the door open gently so as not to startle her. But Lin wasn't there. The window was wide open. Rain had soaked her books. Outside, the garden was pitch black, the drizzle falling like whispers. The house was locked up tight, and the two family dogs, known to bark at the slightest sound, were completely silent. Then, he heard it. A faint murmur from the starfruit trees. He crept onto the balcony and looked down. Lynn was standing near the base of a tree, whispering softly. And in front of her was a black figure, tall, faceless, its head pressed into the wall. The figure didn't move. Lynn just kept muttering to it. Uncle D shouted, "Lynn!" She jolted, fell backward, and a sharp, metallic laugh split through the air. The black figure was gone. The next morning, my grandmother rubbed medicated oil on Lynn's temples and fanned her with silver scissors, a traditional way of pulling out the wind. Lynn finally came to, confused why she was in bed. After hours of coaxing, she remembered. A week earlier, while studying, she'd heard taps at the window, like pebbles hitting the glass. She got scared, almost called her father. Then a whisper floated up from the starfruit garden. "Lynn!" She froze. The voice came again, clear as day. "Lynn!" She didn't know why, but she answered back. Then the window swung open, and a hand appeared. A girl's hand. Lynn said she didn't remember the girl's face, only that it felt familiar. She wasn't scared. She let the girl pull her through the window and down into the garden. The girl made her sing. They whispered together. Then, close to her ear, the girl said, "I'll come find you again tomorrow night." Then she guided Lynn back up through the window, like nothing had happened. When Uncle D asked about the black figure pressed to the wall and the horrible laughter, Lynn sobbed uncontrollably. She swore there was only the girl. The family panicked. My grandmother quietly went to the ancestral altar, gathered some things, and worked alone in the starfruit garden all morning. By noon, she returned, pale and silent. She only said one thing: it won't bother her anymore. After that, Lynn slowly regained her color, and Uncle D nailed the window shut. It stayed sealed for years. Until one day, it didn't. Story 10. The Classmate. Lynn had been studying day and night for her university entrance exams, but after that mysterious illness, her energy just faded away. Her uncle and aunt did everything to take care of her. My parents even came by often, slipping her boxes of Ensure to keep her strength up. A month before the exam, Lynn buried herself in books, cutting off all her usual distractions. At best, she'd allow herself a few minutes of TV here and there. But in the end, Lynn failed. She missed the entrance score by just 1 point. She didn't even bother applying to a college after that. When she got the news, Lynn fell into a deep sickness. She cried for days, barely eating, sleeping most of the time. Her thin frame grew even more frail. Sunken eyes, pale skin, but she was still beautiful in that tragic way. Her eyes always seemed on the verge of tears, like she was caught between this world and another. During that week, Lynn was like someone else entirely, sometimes crying hysterically, sometimes mumbling and laughing to herself. One night, she suddenly sat up in bed and whispered, "There's a funeral going on out there by the riverbank." But why so late at night? Her uncle told her to go back to bed. The next morning, the sound of funeral horns echoed through the village. Someone really had died that night. And when the coffin was being carried past the little path near the river by our house, it suddenly stopped. No one could move it for almost 30 minutes. They said souls born in the village always wanted to see the river one last time before they left. Her aunt and uncle didn't tell Lynn any of this, but something in the air shifted after that. Lynn grew thinner. Her crying, her silence, her dark circles. It was haunting. That week, I visited her almost every day. Mostly, I just sat by her side, listening to her talk to herself. She spoke of an old story, a thief from the village who'd been caught and beheaded down by the river more than 10 years ago. They'd tied him against a wall and split his skull open with a machete. She told that story like she'd seen it with her own eyes. A week later, Lynn suddenly got better. No more random talking. She came downstairs to eat, started smiling again. Her body slowly filled out. She said she wanted to study again. Her parents were relieved. They found her a spot at a military finance school, something to keep her occupied and not alone at home all the time. Lynn agreed and went back to studying, determined to try again. That summer, we all went on a trip to Ha Long Bay. Lynn came with us. The ocean air seemed to lift her spirits. But one day, my dad had a bad fall, hurt his back, and we had to return early. Since Mom was working and my brother and I were at school, Lynn offered to stay at our house to help take care of him. She didn't know what was waiting for her. Every night at my house, Lynn liked to climb up to the rooftop terrace. Our neighborhood was full of old two-story housing blocks. From the top of our third floor, you could see everything. Lynn said she liked the feeling of the wind on her face. She'd breathe it in deeply and smile. "River girls love the wind," she'd say. It felt normal again. No more creepy muttering. Just us, talking under the night sky. Until that night. Like usual, after dinner, Lynn washed the dishes, then turned off the TV and called me up to the rooftop. It was hot, the air still and heavy. No breeze, no moonlight. We talked for a while, and when I checked my watch, it was past 10:30. The whole neighborhood was dark. Only one house nearby still had its rooftop light on. Lynn turned to me suddenly. "Why the hell is that girl wearing a dress in this weather?" Her tone was strange. I looked where she was pointing, the rooftop across the way. It was empty, not a single soul. Lynn frowned. "She's pacing back and forth up there, wearing that stupid dress. Why does she keep looking at me?" I knew then. Something was wrong. Trying to play along, I said, "Yeah, I see her too. Can't really tell what she's wearing, though." "She's wearing a short blue dress, and her hair's tied in 2 braids. It's her, Anna Ja." My blood ran cold. Back in middle school, I had a close friend. Her name was Lynn, too. Same first name, same last name. We grew up together, played together every day. One night, during the Mid-Autumn Festival when I was in 9th grade, I got a call. Lynn had been hit by a construction truck while riding her bike near the Cao intersection. Her legs were crushed. She died later that night at the hospital. When she died, she was wearing a blue dress, hair tied in 2 braids, exactly as Lynn had just described. I pulled her off the rooftop immediately. Her face went white as chalk as I told her the story. The next morning, she begged to go back home. That night, Lynn couldn't sleep. Her bedroom window, nailed shut by her uncle since the garden incident, remained locked. She made her younger sister Lian sleep upstairs with her. To reach Lynn's room, they had to pass through the narrow corridor by the dog kennel, climb the stone steps, and walk another hallway. They were holding hands when they opened the door. Lynn screamed, then she collapsed. Lian panicked and screamed too, calling for their parents. When they rushed upstairs and revived Lynn, she was trembling violently, tears streaming down her face. She pointed to the foot of the bed where Lian had been sitting moments ago. In a broken whisper, she said, "She was sitting right there. The girl from A&H Ju's house. Her arms, her legs. She was right next to Lian."